1967, shortly before the outbreak of the Third Great Arab-Israeli War, the United States sent a U.S. Navy ship to the eastern Mediterranean with orders to patrol near Egypt and Israel. The ship was the USS Liberty, an intelligence collection vessel. Her mission was to listen to the battlefield messages from both sides. On June 8th, the USS Liberty was 12.5 miles off the coast of the Gaza Strip. The crew was not expecting trouble, so they were not alarmed when Israeli military jets came out to look them over. Low-flying aircraft took pictures from every angle. The pilots waved and the sailors waved back. Radio operators aboard the Liberty heard the Israeli pilots inform their headquarters that she was an American ship. At noon, under a clear blue sky, Liberty sailors carried towels and deck chairs to the main deck for sunbathing. At sea, the day was calm and peaceful. An hour later, the shooting started. 34 American sailors died, and 171 others were wounded. Recently, survivors gathered in Washington on the 20th anniversary of the attack. This is their story.
I simply cannot accept the claim that the attack on the Liberty was a result of misidentification, because I will never accept the fact that the professionalism of the Israeli forces, who have been in several wars since World War II and have fared extremely well, I won't accept that their professionalism is such that they did not identify this ship. The facts being that I have probably had as much experience, if not more, than any living person in flying over the ocean and identifying ships in peace and war, and I do know quite a bit about that, and I think if you understand that the Liberty was the ugliest ship in the Navy, the only ship like it in the Atlantic Ocean, and that the Israelis keep very close tabs on military equipments owned by various nations. I just will never believe and accept the fact that it was lack of identification that caused them to attack.
All during the reconnaissance period during the morning, we kept the standard American flag flying the entire time. The first thing I did when I took the watch and noticed that our steaming colors were fairly dirty because we'd been steaming at high speed for several days, I had our last clean, bright colors put up. And then I watched all morning to see that they were not only up, but that they were displayed, held out in the wind so that the aircraft could see them. Every time I instructed the quartermasters, I said, your most important duty up here is to keep that flag so it doesn't ever wrap around the mast or tangle in the lines or any way that the airplanes can't see it. And just keep an eye, and the lookouts too, I told them, keep an eye on that flag all the time and see that it's kept out. At the same time, we were steaming at 5 knots. We were headed usually directly into a 7-knot wind, so we had 12 knots of wind most of the morning across the flag, which is plenty to hold it out well displayed so anybody could see it. Every time the airplane came over, or one of the airplanes, I would make it a point to go out and look at the flag and look at the airplane, and I'd say, all right, the flag is hanging straight out. Here's the airplane looking straight at it. I know that they can see the flag. I can see the pilot in his cockpit. I can see his head and shoulder. I know that he can see that 5-foot by 8-foot American flag.
So we were that morning in that trash com basket cleaning it, and when these the jets came out and circled us, I think on like 4 different occasions, and then I'd say around an hour and a half or so prior to the attack, we were there to observe them coming out with an open boxcar type of plane with a bunch of cameras in it and so forth, and We didn't take this very seriously because we were always being surveillanced or whatever by planes and so forth, so we didn't think a whole lot about it. Then we had a practice general quarters, and then after lunch we were ready to go back up and finish our duties there. And when the first strafe of the jets hit, one which came over the bow and we heard the noise, and then one came out of the sun on our, I think it was our port side, to hit us with whatever they were shooting.
The most notable thing during my watch during the morning was the extent of reconnaissance by the Israelis. There was a fairly close circle of the ship by an Israeli reconnaissance plane before I took the watch at about 6 or 6:30. And then during my watch, there were continual overflights of about every 40 minutes or hour all morning long by aircraft that were usually clearly marked with the Israeli Star of David and low enough that we could see the markings. Usually these were NOR Atlas 2501 obvious reconnaissance planes. Would circle the ship at quite low level, often low enough that we could see the pilots. Our crew members waved to the pilots and would actually see the pilots waving back. You could make out the pilots in their cockpits clearly, make out their facial features. At one point we were circled quite low by two jet aircraft with rockets hanging under the wings that circled the ship 3 times. On at least one other occasion, there was a NOR Atlas that passed down up the starboard side, crossed in front, down the port side, and then came over directly over the ship while the captain was on the bridge at very, very low level. I'd say less than 200 feet over the ship. It was so low that the captain, who was standing with me at the time, commented, "Watch those bomb doors. If you see bomb doors start to open, make an immediate hard right turn." And actually, I don't think it had bomb doors, and they didn't open, but you could see what looked like camera ports under the airplane. During the noon hour, I was relieved by Lloyd Painter, and I left to check on my duties below and to have some lunch, and I probably wasn't going more than 20 minutes. I came back on the bridge because I had responsibilities with general quarters. I was training to be general quarters officer of the deck. So I resumed the watch at 1 o'clock. We had the quarters drill, and at 2 o'clock, just as the general quarter was ending, and just as I returned the responsibilities of the bridge back to Lieutenant Painter, the radar had been reported high-speed surface craft, motor torpedo boats actually, from the direction of Tel Aviv, 16 miles away, approaching at 30 knots. And now that's very, very fast. Immediately they then reported that there are high-performance aircraft passing right over the top of the boats, also at 16 miles from the direction of Tel Aviv. We were at that point not alarmed because these airplanes had been passing us all day long. Some of our intercept operators had heard them reporting to the Israeli headquarters that we were an American ship, that they saw men on deck, that they saw our American flag, so we were not at all alarmed. We tried to get some photographs. I walked up on the next deck with Chuck Rowley, who was a photographer on the ship, trying to take some pictures. There were probably 12 or 15 of us up there on the 04 level, 4 decks above the main level. Chuck started taking some pictures, and someone yelled that he's firing. There were flashes under the wings.
One of the planes got almost directly ahead of us, and it just peeled off. And I was up, and I was watching the front of the plane just light up like a Christmas tree. Well, I guess it was just reflex that made me hit the deck. And just luckily, unbeknownst to me, I was hit by just a little shrapnel, but not much. And after the first pass, everybody jumped up. There's about a dozen of us up there. We ran down to the pilot house, and general quarters was sounded. And we waited out the the air attack. Just after in the lull between the air attack and the torpedo attack, I guess the air attack lasted about 15 or 20 minutes. And since my job was signalman, every once in a while in the lull between strafing attacks and the like, I used to stick my head out on the port wing of the bridge and look up at the mast to make sure that the steaming ensign was still flying from the gaff. Well, I'd noticed that it had been shot down, so one time there was just a little too long between strafing attacks, so I thought that Russell David and myself, Russell David was the other signalman, the leading signalman, thought that it would probably be an opportune idea, although it might be dangerous, to make sure that we put up another flag, and so we opened up the flag bag, the locker where we kept the ensigns, and we grabbed the largest one we could find, the holiday colors. Normally a steaming ensign is 5 by 7 feet. Well, the holiday colors, as we call it, the largest flag is 9 by 13 feet. So we grabbed it and took it up to the signal bridge, and of course the steaming ensign had been shot down, so there wasn't any halyard to put it on the gaff, so we took a number 4 halyard from port side and just ran it up on that as quickly as we could for obvious reasons.
First thing I felt was a tremendous amount of heat. I turned my left side toward the heat to protect myself. I raised an arm, and all the men around me dropped. I was thrown against a railing. I could see 4 or 5 men on the forecastle and around the gun mounts on the forward part of the ship. Orange flashes from the rocket hits just walked down the deck of the ship, and the men in the forward gun mounts literally thrown up in the air. I was, as I say, thrown back against the railing. My left leg was broken above the knee, and I had about 35 wounds from metal fragments from the rockets. Yet I was the only one left standing on like one good right leg, and I looked up, and I heard the airplane pass overhead and swoosh and then silence, and I looked ahead, and here's the second plane making its turn to come down firing. And I hopped down on my good right leg into the pilot house and fell literally in a puddle of blood. Just as the second airplane hit, big holes ripped in the side of the ship, and men falling, all kinds of pretty terrible things happening. It was about that time that the entire starboard wing of the bridge burst into literally a wall of flame. You could look out the starboard door of the pilot house, and you couldn't see anything but flame out there. And the captain stepped through the flame as if it didn't exist, and he called out, "Fire, fire!" In the pilot house. Call away the fire party. And it seemed like immediately firemen with hoses running up and down the ladders and fire extinguishers and so forth. The airplanes continued to hit us again and again.
A horseshoe-shaped indentation in the back of the ship there where some compartments come around at the fantail. And with each strafe, we went from corner to corner, evading the machine gun rocket fire. There was a very bad fire to port side with some smoke, and this smoke was not coming across the fantail, it was sort of just going and staying to port side. Anyhow, we went back and forth about 4 or 5 times, and each time I would look for the other jet, after the one would complete its strafe, look for the other jet that would be coming in, because these pilots were experts. I always commented how good they could shoot, and they just hit everything they wanted to. And at any rate, each time it did, well, every time I saw our flag flying. And one particular strafe, after it was finished, I come out from the protection of the corner of the bulkhead a little too soon, and I saw eye to eye one of the pilots. He's very close to the ship, and as soon as he saw me, he flattened out and went straight out the fantail. And I told Fred to get behind the blower, and there's only room for one man back there. And then I tried to give protection on one of the cleats, chalk that they tie the ship up with when we were in port. And as I lay down, I got in fetal position, I guess instinctively. And before I closed my eyes, and I guess prepared for what was going to happen, the last thing I saw was our flag flying.
If you will examine the photographs of the ship afterwards, the Israelis obviously had sufficient time to plan their armament load. There were apparently heat-seeking missiles used to take out the tuning coil of every HF antenna. There were fragmentation bombs used to take out the parabolic dish fore and aft. On the first strafing run, virtually all communications and all means of survival were destroyed. If it was an accident, it was the best prepared accident on Earth.
As far as Radio Central was concerned, needed to get the word out that we were being attacked. And during the first strafing runs by the jets, the accuracy of the Israeli fire knocked out most of the antennas on a ship that we would normally use to transmit the word. So between strafing runs, I was running out back and forth on deck trying to get an antenna to work so we could get the word out. An ironic thing here, the antenna that we got out on, to the best of my recollection, was one that I had put out of service shortly after leaving Norfolk because there was a problem in the tuner. And that was the only 40-foot whip on the ship that was still standing at the time, but the tuner had taken a hit by 50 caliber machine gun from the plane and had started working with a little help from me. So we got out on an antenna that didn't work.
I had launch ready at that time 12 aircraft, conventionally armed, and I immediately launched them. At the same time, I picked up my radio, and using my own voice call, I called Vice Admiral W.I. Martin, who was commander of 6th Fleet, advising him of the receipt of Liberty's message, and that unless otherwise directed, I was launching a ready strike group in support of Liberty. He immediately responded, indicating that he approved my action and ordered the other aircraft carrier in company, the USS Saratoga, to follow suit. We immediately launched, and to my surprise, the America did not launch. I was astounded, and at first I thought perhaps I had misread the message or Admiral Martin's response. But checking, I had not, and so I sent a message to America asking them why they were not launching. To this day, I have not received an answer. About the same time, a message came from Rear Admiral Larry Geis, who was the Carrier Division commander, and who was not the officer in tactical command, but who was senior to me, who had somehow been given officer in tactical command, or assumed it, ordering the strike aircraft to return to Saratoga.
I chose to go from the wardroom to the sick bay by going across the deck, and was there when a line of rockets hit, and I realized as the announcement was made that we were under attack of what was happening. There have been stories told of the number and the types of the wounded that we had, and most briefly, just name any portion of the human body that can be wounded, and we had someone who had a wound there. One of the men here, Tom Riley, I remember that he had a almost surgically precise wound of his head. You could look through a portion of his scalp, and if you pulled the hair back, you could see his brain with skull and coverings moved away underneath that. When I think of someone who was not a favorite to make the 20-year reunion, he's the prime person that I think of, but there were many others.
I didn't even realize what had happened, and next thing I knew, I was laying on the main deck there, and I was in a pile of paint itself. I didn't realize what had happened to myself. It was probably too quick for my body to sense what had happened. All I seen was blood, and I was wondering where it had come from, and it was just running and mixing it in with the haze gray paint that I was laying on the deck in. And I looked up, and all I seen was the forward gun mount, blood running down the bulkhead there, and everybody running in hysteria all over the place. I was trying to understand what was happening, and then I realized that there were jets flying over. We had just secured from general quarters just shortly before that, and we had the planes flying around us for a good time. I don't know exactly how long, but they were flying over our heads. I was on the starboard side of the ship as a lookout up on the bridge. Just before that, I had gone below, and the next thing I realized, I was laying down there. I had tried to crawl along the deck a little bit. I called for help, but everybody was running in like mad hysteria all over the place. I reached up and I asked somebody, please help me. I don't even remember who it was at the time, but they made a beeline for the door, one of the doors, and down below. I can't blame anybody because it was flying all over the place. And I was just kind of in and out of consciousness. I was looking at everybody. They looked like skeletons to myself as they were running around. As I did try to crawl, I got wounded back through my leg again, right through my back of my leg and out the front. And I just must have passed out after that. I woke up shortly after. I was down on the mess deck on a table. Just looking over my body, I was covered with holes, like over 250 through my chest. My legs and my arms I thought they were broken at the time. And I kept asking someone to set them. I didn't realize that I was paralyzed.
Later on, a second launch was ordered again, in which this time I only launched 12 because I had no more tanker aircraft available. And this launch was about 90 minutes after the first one. At this time, both carriers launched 12 conventionally launched armed aircraft. And they were recalled by the same authority, and that is Admiral Geis. And that's my story at the moment. To this day, I have never been told by anybody, though I have inquired, as to why the strike aircraft, my first strike group, which was sufficient enough to drive off any of the forces attacking Liberty, and perhaps save, well, I know they could have gotten there and driven off the motor torpedo boats that were attacking Liberty without any trouble.
Finally, word was passed to stand by for a torpedo attack because those boats that we had picked up earlier on radar were now within firing range. They fired, we learned ultimately, they fired 5 torpedoes, missed with 4. Only one of them hit us just about directly below where I was. It blew a 40-foot hole in the side of the ship, instantly killed 25 men. There had been 9 others dead or dying from the aircraft and from injuries from machine gunning from the torpedo boats. Then the torpedo boats came closer, examined us from very close range, and then started to circle the ship, machine gunning the men who were on deck and anything that moved. People who were putting out the fires. The last airplane runs dropped napalm, and some of the airplane runs burst open 2 55 gallons of gasoline, which are set on fire. So we had 110 gallons of flaming gasoline dripping down ladders, and we were trying to put those things out. So the torpedo boats fired upon the men fighting those fires. Finally, word was passed to prepare to abandon ship, at which point Lieutenant Painter started evacuating the wounded men in stretchers up to the main deck so that they could go into the lifeboats if necessary. Some life rafts, 3 inflatable life rafts, were dropped over the side. The torpedo boats came closer, machine gunned the empty life rafts in the water.
I had gone as far forward as I possibly could, which was really kind of stupid in a way, because I mean, what did I know at the time? But being below the waterline where I was and bracing myself, I heard moans kind of thing and bubbling sounds like going by the ship. And I at the time, I didn't really realize what it was. I thought it was just kind of the ship rolling in the water or whatever, sitting dead in the water. But, you know, after thinking about it, I realized what that really was. That was the forward torpedo that missed us.
So I happened to be in the room where the torpedo hit, and I guess being very fortunate, I was one of the few. I think 20 or 25 of us survived from that, which 25 or so did not. But I was a party to helping get people out of that space and getting them up on decks, and to only get up there and find out that we were being had helicopters hanging over the ship there with 50 calibers to think, well, we made it out of there, we're going to get killed now. And
just before the torpedo hit, bullets were coming from the starboard side of the ship. They were coming through the engine room like starflies. When the torpedo hit, we immediately raised up out of the water, dropped back down into the water, and took a 9-degree list. We have instruments in the engine room to gauge this. Then the bullets were still coming through from the starboard side, and I knew that we had a problem, not only with the torpedo hit that it hit us, the equipment that was dead because of the torpedo hit, the vibration had knocked our generators off the line. Our boiler was gone because when the generators went, so did our circulating pumps, fuel oil service pumps that supplied the life fluid to keep these pieces of equipment going. And I noticed as the bullets were coming through that they all were coming through on the same plane, which meant with a 9-degree starboard list, they were coming through above the waterline. None of them were hitting below the waterline. To ensure that my people in the engine room could not be harmed, I ordered all of them on the main control level to crawl on their hands and knees, which would put them below the waterline, and they would not be in danger of a bullet hitting them. But with the lights out, it was so unbelievable. Being a country boy at night, seeing the star flies flying around, but to watch bullets in a darkened space come through one side and go through another is something as fascinating, yet it's so deadly. At that particular time, I also remembered the torpedo attacks that I'd been through before, and I knew that the Liberty would not pull out of this one. I immediately ordered all of my people to leave the engine room. I felt that being an ex-enlisted man, that I was fully capable of handling all the equipment in that space. They all left except Chief Brooks and Ash, and they refused to.
They were professional, they knew what they were doing. We were totally helpless. At that point, the torpedo boats came in. Initially, it appears they attempted to blow up the boilers by shooting 3-inch shells into the engineering spaces. When that failed, they launched torpedoes. Incidentally, at that point in time, helicopter gunships appeared overhead to pick off survivors.
When they sent out helicopters, of course, on occasion I'd been sticking my head out the port wing of the bridge again, looking up at the flag and make sure it was flying freely, just to make sure that it was. And on one of those occasions, one of the helicopters snuck up on me. I wasn't thinking, I guess, and it snuck up on me and hovered about 100 yards off of the port wing of the bridge. And I vividly remember looking up to it and seeing armed troops with battle dress and carrying automatic weapons. And
there was American naval attaché with the American embassy there in Tel Aviv. He came out by helicopter and incredibly dropped a business card, calling card among the bodies on the forecastle and asked if anybody was hurt.
Helicopter came by and they dropped a brown bag, weighed it down by a couple of oranges that I had caught, and inside was a little note. Took out the little note, looked at it, and said, you know, do you have any casualties? And, you know, looking up at this thing and saying, you know, you got to be kidding me. You know, I mean, you couldn't walk on that forecastle without walking on a piece of somebody. It was just incredible. I mean, you know, not to be gross or anything like that, but, you know, I mean, guys were in pieces laying on that deck. I mean, you saw shoes with feet in them, and that's it, laying on the deck. I mean, how can somebody be so stupid to ask if any casualties? I mean, guys were laying all over the place, you know. And at that point, we started bringing some of the bodies and the wounded still down from that forecastle and wherever they were on the deck, and, you know, bringing them back to the mess decks, or bringing the dead back in one of the storerooms. I had taken that note and started bringing it up to the bridge, and I had passed it along to somebody else, brought it up to the captain, and that's when the captain got the message. But
the following morning after the attack, I was medevaced by helicopter to the USS America, where I was placed in sickbay. And I believe the third day after the arrival on the America, the doctor felt it was time to take the bandages off and see what my vision was like, and took a scalpel and cut the scabs that had formed on my eyelids and opened my eyes, and my vision was fine. After that, I was ambulatory, and Admiral Geese sent a message down asking me to report to his quarters, which I did. He informed me that being the senior survivor on board the USS America, he wanted me to be aware of just what he had done so we would not feel him remiss. He said that he had launched his ready aircraft and then notified Washington. Shortly thereafter, the Secretary McNamara ordered a recall of the aircraft. Now, I'm not sure at this many years afterwards whether he said that it was because Secretary McNamara had ordered them back because they had nuclear weapons aboard, or whether he assumed that that was the reason that the Secretary recalled them. But in any case, at this point, he said he unloaded the armament aboard these aircraft, reloaded with conventional armament, and relaunched the aircraft, and re-notified Washington. Secretary McNamara, again, he said, ordered their recall. At this point, apparently in frustration, he exercised his military prerogative of going to the next higher echelon in command if you don't feel that an order that has been given is proper. And he said that President Johnson then came on and ordered the recall of the aircraft with the comment that he would not embarrass his allies. His concern was not for the ship, or words to that effect. Well, it's obvious to me, even at that point in time, that President Johnson knew precisely who was doing the attacking and why. And to this day, I can't understand why we're still covering up the fact that it was a deliberate attack.
Well, I think the motive seems to be very apparent, namely that the Israelis were preparing to attack in the Golden Heights, and they did not want the United States government to know that this attack was pending, because there had been some discussions about the expansion of the Israeli effort during this war, and I think the Israelis had been advised that the United States would not look with favor on this attack into Syria, and consequently the purpose was to make certain that the communications that Israel had to evoked in order to organize this attack, they wanted to be certain that it was not known in advance by the United States.
And almost immediately, the cover-up started. It was within just a very few hours of the end of the attack and of the word from Washington that we started getting messages from Washington saying no one will talk about this. All press releases will come from the Pentagon and be directed by the Pentagon. And it worked that way. We were told literally from the beginning that anything that there's going to be a court of inquiry, that the court of inquiry will investigate and report everything, and because of this proceeding, we'll wait until after the court of inquiry before anything will be said by the crew. After the court of inquiry, you'll be free to talk. It took until about June 27th, about another 3 weeks, before the Court of Inquiry's report was produced and released. It turned out to be what most of us consider an incredible whitewash. It was a report about 23 pages long. It made findings of fact and conclusions which were totally opposite of what we had seen. Instead of describing an extended air attack, it indicated that there was maybe 5 or 6 minutes of air attack and a single torpedo, and that we were then told that we were now free, because the Court of Inquiry report had been published, we're now free to talk to the press. However, since the Court of Inquiry has reported officially everything that is not classified, the only thing you can tell the press is what is in the Court of Inquiry, and in fact you must use the same words that the Court of Inquiry used, so we recommend that you not bother because there's nothing left for you to say. The crew was then reminded almost daily in talks given by visitors from Washington and captain and so forth that you can't say anything that wasn't in the Court of Inquiry, and that any interviews with the press must be cleared with the public affairs officer at the base in Norfolk, usually, and that's where it stayed.
And telling us not to talk about it, the words came down, and we knew right away that, at least in my mind, it was a cover-up. And basically, I lived that way all the years that I had left back in the service. And snide remarks when I did go on to a different ship of, well, you come from the Liberty, you guys are real tough, huh? And hiding the fact that you weren't a Liberty by taking all my patches off. And other guys said the same thing, that you talked to, that patches were confiscated from you. Immediately when I come aboard my new ship, patch was taken right off before I got my billet. He says, yeah, you won't need these anymore. These will be sewing on before morning. And it was like a big cover-up, and everybody was afraid to expose the Liberty. You know, what the hell happened? What was going on?
I haven't had any contact with my shipmates since this has happened. As a matter of fact, right after it first happened, they kept guards on my door, and they wouldn't let me speak to nobody, and I couldn't understand why. And then they kind of scattered everybody that was remaining on the ship when they first came back to port. I guess the United States, they scattered everybody all over the world so they couldn't talk to each other or kind of communicate with each other and put everything together.
Like we're doing now.
Yeah.
Like we've tried to do for 20 years.
I'm glad this is all happening right now. I probably won't be...
We'll be telling your story.
I probably won't get a chance to see anybody again. But I've really enjoyed this. I got a lot of feelings that I've been holding up inside for many years.
Insult or injury, when we arrived in the States, the Red Cross hadn't notified the families of anyone. I specifically went to the Army and to the Red Cross in Frankfurt at the airport to make sure that they were met at when the plane landed in the States. none were met. I called my wife, and she said, "Where are you? What are you doing here?" A few months later, I got a call from Captain McGonigal. He said he was being presented with the Congressional Medal of Honor, and there hadn't been time to notify any of the troops. Since I was in Washington, would I come witness the award? It was not in the White House. It was in the Navy Department. It was not awarded by the President. It was awarded by the Secretary of the Navy. And, I think it's a shame that this can't be corrected at this time, and have the Congressional Medal of Honor appropriately awarded in the White House for Captain McGonigal.
But there is one thing that I don't understand, and I'll never be able to understand it. Not just why Israel did this. There was a lot of statements made about it. But I can't understand why at the Board of Inquiry, as the engineering officer, damage control officer, acting executive officer, then acting commanding officer of that ship, why I was not invited to the Board of Inquiry. Why I specifically was not asked what happened, how it happened, etc. I was one of the few officers, but one of the top ones, that should know everything that's going on. And I did not know, I was not invited to participate and to talk to the Board of Inquiry as a formal thing why it happened.
Following the return of the unsuccessful attempt to rescue the Liberty, the task force was dispersed. I heard through rumor only that a board of investigation had been convened. Not one soul came and queried me as to what I had done, what I had heard, or even what I thought. And to this day, nobody has questioned me.
My recovery period was very long.
You spent something over 8 years in the hospital, as I recall.
Well, from the day I went into the hospital to the first day I got out of the hospital permanently after I was wounded was over 2 years. At first I didn't have no really desire to live. I guess I was feeling more sorry for myself than anything, but I've grown out of that. I did spend an extensive amount of times in the hospital. I have seizure disorder from shrapnel that was lodged in my brain, that's still in my brain. I try not to think about that far too much.
Yeah, we understand that. I realize it's painful to talk about this, and you don't have to talk if you don't want to, but if you can give us...
Every time I've gone back to the hospital, I hate the hospital so bad now. Since this happened, I've been in the hospital over 8 years of my life. But I'm really thankful to be here and to see all my shipmates again. I haven't had such great news the last few times I've been in the hospital. The piece of shrapnel that's lodged in my brain through the years, it's grown up. It's to protect the brain from itself. It's grown cartilage around the shrapnel piece itself. And now it's getting worse and worse. Now I'm supposed to be getting an operation on it and have it removed. And I'll be paralyzed for the rest of my life. This is what happens to me. And if I don't get it out by September, the doctor said it's going to cost me, it would rupture one of the vessels in my brain they said it would be an aneurysm. He tried to explain it to me. And I've been kind of scared since then. I don't really know what I want to do. but I told him, just please let me out of the hospital. I don't want to be in there anymore.
All of us who saw it were very much struck by the Israeli excuse, which was simply blatantly not true. For instance, the Israelis tell us in their official report, where there are a number of what they call official reports sent to the United States. They're all different, but generally they tell the story that the attack occurred because airplanes were sent out to investigate a report of shelling of the beach at the little village of El Arish. Well, there was no shelling at the beach. So they say, well, yeah, that's true. There wasn't any shelling from the beach, but we had an erroneous report of shelling from the beach, so that's why we sent the airplanes, or the torpedo boats to investigate. If you ask them, why did you send torpedo boats on a 3-hour mission to investigate shelling of the beach from high-speed surface craft, it seems a little more logical to send airplanes, since you had airplanes in the air. They don't have any answer to that. They say, well, we sent torpedo boats. Then they claim that the torpedo boats picked up the Liberty at 20 minutes past 1, which was 39 minutes before the air attack started. That they made a plotting error and mistakenly plotted the ship as going 32 knots, about 32 miles an hour. This is a massive 500% error, and they say that's justified because they made the mistake over a period. They made the plot over a period of a few minutes, and therefore it was magnified. Well, that's silly, because you just anybody that runs a radar knows that how much margin of error you're going to get and how long a period you need to make the plot. But nevertheless, that's their story, that they made this terrible error. They thought we were going 32 knots. Therefore, by their gunnery doctrine, we were automatically classified as an enemy vessel. Therefore, it was authorized and legal for them to attack us. They couldn't catch us because 32 knots was about the same as their top speed. So supposedly they called in the aircraft. The official story, which lately there's changed that one recently also, but their official story is that the airplanes came out. The lead pilot, whose name they tell us was Captain Spector, dropped down to 3,000 feet and circled the ship twice looking for a flag, could see none. His second in command dropped down and circled once, could see no flag. They radioed this information to their headquarters and were then told that obviously it's an Egyptian ship and you have permission to attack. And so then only then did they throw caution to the wind and come in attacking the ship. Now, they tell us that late in that attack, golly, somebody recognized that it was an American ship. And immediately, they say, after 20 or 25 minutes of strafing, immediately they called off the air attack and sent word to the torpedo boats. Now, the torpedo men say they never got the message, so they continued for another 40, 45 minutes to attack us.
The stories of whether there was a flag flying or whether there was not make you sort of think that the Israeli Air Force in 1967 was reliving the days of the Red Baron in 1917, when a squadron of planes was sent out and told, look in this area, and if you see anything that you think is worth attacking, we'll go and attack it. Well, in 1967, this was not the way jet planes, with their short period of being able to fly on without refueling, were operated. They were told there is a target at this spot, attack the target at this spot. And that's precisely what they did, and they did that to the best of their abilities. We would say that this was the Israeli Air Force that destroyed the Jordanian Air Force while it was on the ground, that destroyed the Egyptian tank force in about as much time as it takes to tell about it, and the next day were destroyed to Syrian artillery. The USS Liberty began its life as a 1945 Victory ship. Our executive officer had commented that two determined men in a rowboat with a blunt instrument could probably take the ship over without very much opposition. However, when the Israeli Air Force and Navy, which had swept the Middle East as with a broom, attempted to take over this ship, they found out that dealing with the smallest, least armed, non-combatant American vessel, you were dealing with a different kettle of fish, that the American Navy is just something different than any other place.
Another part of the Israeli excuse is that, of course, they say there was no flag. The quartermasters will tell you that they put one up. They tell us that they signaled by flashing light, an international signal asking us to identify ourselves. They say that we refused. The quartermasters will tell you they didn't send us such a signal, and we didn't refuse. On the contrary, we flashed in English over and over again, USS Liberty, U.S. Navy ship. And they ignored it and continued firing until they hit the signalman and shot out his light. They claim, of course, that they, when they did draw close enough to see us, clearly that they finally did see some American markings and promptly stopped firing, and just about anybody on that ship will tell you that the firing continued for another 40 minutes after the explosion. From there on went the cover-up, which has literally persisted to this day. You still find it extremely difficult to find very much information, to find any straight answers from the government about what happened. We did quite recently, through a Freedom of Information Act suit, which has now cost more than $32,000 to pursue. Some people did force from the government a State Department analysis of the Israeli excuse, which shows most of the defects that we just talked about, and literally brands the Israeli excuse as untrue. You would expect that most nations would go back to the attacker and ask for a satisfactory explanation. Our country didn't, and on the contrary, the United States classified that report top secret and locked it away, where it stayed for about 16 years until the Freedom of Information Act brought it out.
I do feel that the Liberty group was somehow let down, that, for instance, every U.S. ship that has been sunk since the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in 1898 has been investigated by the Congress. And none of them have ever bothered to investigate the attack on the Liberty.
The Court of Inquiry itself has monumental holes in it. One of the things that we pursue as much as we can is the fact that the Court of Inquiry was simply not conducted in accordance with Navy regulations. Navy Judge Advocate General regulations require that any finding of fact and opinion be supported by evidence, and that the evidence be in the record of the court. You'll find a number of major pieces of fact and opinion which are contrary to the evidence in the file. And for instance, there is a finding of fact that says that the Israelis may have mistaken the ship because the ship's flag probably hung limp at the mast on a windless day. In fact, obviously, as I explained before, it stood out straight with 12 knots of wind across the flag. That fact is documented in the ship's weather logs, which show that there was 12 knots of wind. The court chose not to enter those logs into its file. No explanation of why. I have a copy of the log. There's a copy in my book which shows that the flag certainly stood out. In addition, there are 6 or 7, mostly chiefs and officers, who reported to the Court of Inquiry that they saw the flag standing straight out in a good breeze. They saw low-flying Israeli aircraft in the area at the time who would have seen the flag. No one told the Court of Inquiry that the flag hung limp at any time. Yet their finding is that it probably hung limp and they couldn't see it. Others think the duration of the attack, how soon it stopped afterward, all these things are quite contrary to the testimony that's in the Court of Inquiry file. We have for years been asking the Navy to look into those conflicts. You know, here's a report that is fallacious. It is contrary to Navy regulations. It's unsupported as it's required to be by evidence. Won't you comment on this? The only comment we get is that the report was signed off and approved, and therefore it's legal, and that's the end of it.
Well, I felt that the monument that was placed in Arlington Cemetery at the site of the mass grave of some of the fatalities, casualties in the attack, was in itself indicative of the fact that an effort was being made to downplay the real facts in this case. For instance, the initial inscription said, died in the Mediterranean. And it took considerable effort and much time to get the inscription set up properly and say that they were killed aboard the USS Liberty. That's what happened to them. They didn't die from any disease or plague or thing of that kind. They were killed.
Why were we attacked? Would this happen to the Russian ship if it was attacked? In my opinion, there'd be no Israel today if it was a Russian ship. While I watched that morning, for 4 hours, I looked below the ship, and the flag was flying. You would have to be blind not to see the flag flying. I want to make that very, very clearly. That was my main job, was stand on watches. Israeli pilots, do they have 20/20 vision? I'd like to know why they did not see that flag flying. They are lying in my books. Another comment I like to make is, I joined the Navy in '65. I swore to the flag that I would protect the country as best as I could. I feel the flag, I feel the country let us down. I feel that should never have happened. I lost 34 friends that day. And if I could do it right now, I would give up everything and go back on Liberty with the commander.